You are listening to Chthonia, the podcast of the Dark Feminine. Chthonia's logo was designed by J.R. Malpair. Background music is Phantasm by Kevin MacLeod. Hello, and welcome to Chthonia, the podcast dealing with the Dark Feminine. I'm your host, Breach Burke, and this week we are going to be covering the last of the matrikas in the matrika series, and that would be Narasimhi, who's also known as Pratyangira, and also has another name, Atharvana Bhadrakali. Okay, she's a little bit different from the others, because the others are kind of considered a group to be known as the Ashta Matrikas, or seven mothers. And she is kind of an eighth that sometimes makes it in, probably more from, say, Nepalese or maybe Tibetan even tradition. But she's not always considered to be, you'll see a cult of seven and a cult of eight. And sometimes, as I have mentioned before, Mahalakshmi is sometimes considered to be the eighth. But we're going to focus on her because she does fit into the categories of the others. Now, just as all the other matrikas tend to be the Shaktis or feminine sides of certain devas, with exceptions like Chamunda, Narasimhi or Pratyangira is actually the Shakti of Narasimha, which is another incarnation of Vishnu. Excuse me. So she is, she has the head of a lion, okay, so we have another, like we had with Varahi, another matrika that is more or less half kind of human-bodied and half animal-bodied. So in a sense, they're neither human nor animal. And I think I had mentioned in the last podcast, I was sort of reminded of Baphomet, which is sort of the goat-headed god that is both male, female, animal, and human in attribute. Kind of representing that balancing of opposites. Now, like the other avatars of Vishnu, like the avatars of Vishnu and the Shaktis connected to these avatars and to Vishnu himself, Narasimhi is in a kind of a protective and preservation kind of a mode. Her appearance is supposed to be very terrifying. Let me read you a little bit about her iconography, what she's supposed to look like. Okay, I'm just going to read this from an entry on her. In some images, she's shown as dark-complexioned, terrible in aspect, having a lion's face with reddened eyes and riding a lion or wearing black garments. She wears a garland of human skulls. Her hair stands on end. She holds a trident, a serpent in the form of a noose, a hand drum, and a skull in her four hands. She is associated with Sharabha and has a variant form, Atharvana Bhadrakali. She is considered to be a powerful repellent of the influences generated by witchcraft, and is said to have the power to punish anyone doing a dharma, and not doing their dharmic duty, be it Brahma, Vishnu, or Shiva. It is said that when Narasimha shakes her lion's mane, she throws the stars into disarray. Pratyangira has a close resemblance to the goddess Sekhmet from Egyptian mythology. Both Pratyangira and Sekhmet are part human, part lion, have a snake overhead, and an aura resembling fire. Both are great warrior goddesses. Okay, so that is the iconography. That is what Narasimha looks like. So, given that, now I want to talk about certain aspects of her, just as I did with the others, kind of focusing on certain features of her. For one, we have the symbolism of the lion head. That, kind of like the sour boar head that Varahi has. That kind of has a loaded mythological symbolism of its own. We want to talk a little bit about the comparison between her and Sekhmet. We want to talk, probably before either of these two, about the story of Narasimha, the avatar that she resembles. And, of course, finally, we're going to talk about Narasimhi as the destroyer of black magic and witchcraft, which makes her sound like, it makes her in some ways a very popular kind of a deity, and you do see the worship of her seems to be more frequent. But certainly tantrics are cautioned, shall we say, about worshiping Narasimhi or getting, being initiated in her mantra. because if you get her attention and she appears to you, her appearance is apparently so terrifying that, some devotees, and then they end up offending her, and then that ends up creating another problem. Because Narasimhi, because she is so against anything that is adharmic or that is improper behavior, even the devotee who might have been wronged in some fashion, if they do something wrong, they also end up bearing the brunt of her wrath. So she is a goddess, another goddess to be handled with great care. Not that those who are devoted to her can't be protected by her, but they've got to be aware that, like a lot of these other goddesses, she doesn't have this beneficent and pleasant face all the time to look at. Like, the appearance is what they call, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's tivra, or ferocious, okay, which is, they mention here the Tantric classifies deities as either Shanta, which is calm or peaceful, Ugra, which is wrathful, Prachanda, which is horrifying, Gora, which is terrifying, and Tivra, which is ferocious. So, although sometimes I have heard Narasimhi described as Ugra. So she is, and so there's some real cautions, kind of like with some of these other tantric deities, about worshipping her. Like some of the others, like Varahi, she is also worshipped at night. Excuse me. And she's not considered to be, her worship takes place at night. And a lot of the pujas or the homas or practices with the reciting her mantras and using the yantra can be very, people want to be careful, because, like I said, if you do something wrong, she can take her wrath out on you, and it's not pleasant. So I cannot say that I personally have experience with Narasimhi. I've not done any kind of ritual. I've not been drawn in that direction, though she is quite an interesting goddess, for her protective aspects and her undoing of evil deeds, whether they're literally black magic or not. I'm reading from the bottom here that this is just something from another site, where they say the goddess is worshipped under the name Pratyangira Devi, goddess with the lioness's face and human body. She's also known as Atharvana Bhadrakali and Narasimhika in the Kali Sahasranama Stotra. The goddess is depicted with 4 hands holding the trishula, the trident, the shanka, which is the conch shell, chakra, which is the discus, and gada, which is the mace. However, in some scriptures, Narasimhi is said to have 2,000 hands with multiple weapons and 1,000 tongues. That must remind me of the vision of Krishna that Arjuna had. It's just like, it's so far beyond what the mind can comprehend. There's, confronting a deity and looking upon a deity and their image and their icon. The closer you get to what you might call I don't like to use the term ultimate reality, but I say the more you lift the veil of Maya, perhaps, and you see these deities, the more dangerous that can be. It's said anyway. This is not unique to Hinduism in any way. But you don't look a deity like that. When you have a vision of that kind of a deity, you be careful about looking at the deity in its own kind of pure form. Like I think of Zeus and Semele, okay, where Hera tricks her into asking him to show himself to her as a god, and then she burns up. You think of the burning bush in the Bible when Moses encounters that, and Yahweh says, take your shoes off and turn your face away, because you don't look into the face of the god. And the same would be true of these deities, if you see them in their true form. Somebody had told me a long time ago a story about my guru, Amma, when she had finished her Devi Bhava ceremony. The Devi Bhava, for anyone who visits Amma, and of course these are not happening this year because of COVID, but she will have, a couple of days, usually 2 to 3 days of darshan, where she sits and wearing her white sari, and people come and she hugs them and so forth. The last night they have, obviously there's a satsang where one of her swamis gives, a lecture of some kind, and then they sing bhajans, they sing songs, and then she goes into a mode called Devi Bhava, or the mood of the goddess, and so they close the curtains and they dress her up in sari and the sort of conical crown, and she sits and receives people all night long. Devi Bhava can go on for hours. Some of the longer ones I've heard as many as 20,000 people have shown up in India. And she, she just goes and goes and goes. There's only one occasion where I heard that she had to stop, get up, and go throw up, because I guess she was taking on so much of people's energy. But the story that I was told, and again, this is anecdotal, but I was told that after one of the Devi Bhavas, one of the women there who was helping clean up, I don't know that she was someone from the ashram. I don't know if she was a devotee from a local group, or if she was actually, or just a devoted family or something that happened to be hanging around, that after the curtains closed, she was standing near the curtain and she couldn't resist the temptation to look behind the curtain. And Amma apparently turned and looked at her, and they said she had the face of Kali, and the woman, which appearance was so terrifying, the woman jumped back, and they said she actually was in the hospital with a high fever for several days after looking upon Amma as Kali, seeing the face of the deity. And that may surprise some people who are devotees of Amma, that she would have that, that she would have that Kali aspect. But that's actually kind of what initially drew me to her, was the fact that she was, it was stressed much earlier on. If you look at some of the earlier videos of her and stuff, you see her doing Kali Bhava. I have an Amma doll. These were made years ago. They may still sell them and still make them, because people do like to have them, where they have a doll of her in her white sari and so forth. But you get different outfits for her, and there is the Kali Bhava outfit. And I have the Kali Bhava outfit, excuse me, though the red dress is starting to get kind of torn up with age, because, of course, that's what I keep her dressed in most of the time. She's got a little skull necklace and carries a sword and a trident, and wears the bright red colors with the crown. So it's kind of funny in a way. But I do know that now when I see things, I mean, that aspect of her is not stressed at all, particularly in the United States, and very likely because people in the United States don't understand these dark goddesses, okay? And they don't understand, their the liberating aspects of them. So, so Amma as a Sadguru would be somebody who would be there to liberate you. So it makes perfect sense that she would she would be in the form of one of these extreme Shaktis. So, so those are the most potent and the most powerful, but it's like these electrical forces. They're very dangerous. Okay, so let's go back to Narasimhi. I'm going to use that name, even though Pratyangira is the one that's more commonly used for her. And it's a name that literally means Prati means reverse, and Angira means attacking. So it's like reverse attacking. So it's the idea is that she reverses attacks of black magic. Okay, and that's what she is, one of the things that she is very often invoked for. So we're going to start with the Narasimha story. Narasimha is an avatar of Vishnu. And let me see if it tells me which one. Because as I mentioned, there's 10. My notes here don't particularly tell me which avatar he is. Like, again, if there's a numbered order of their appearance. Okay, so let's just look at the legend itself of Narasimha. I think that's the best place to start. Okay, the Bhagavata Purana describes that Vishnu, in his previous avatar as Varaha, which we had talked about last week with Varahi, killed the evil Ashura Hiranyaksha. Okay, the younger brother of Hiranyaksha, demon king Hiranyakashipu, hated Vishnu and wanted revenge. He undertook many years of austere penance to gain special powers. Thereafter, Brahma offered Hiranyakashipu, I've got to make sure I say that right, a boon. Hiranyakashipu asked, "Grant me that I not die within any residence or outside any residence, during the daytime or at night, nor on the ground nor in the sky. Grant me that my death may not be brought about by any weapon, nor by any human being or animal. Grant me that I may not meet death from any entity, living or non-living, created by you. Grant me further that I am not killed by any demigod or demon, or by any great snake from the lower planets." Brahma granted him the boon, and Hiranyakashipu gained these powers. Hiranyakashipu, once powerful and invincible with the new boon, began to persecute those who were devotees of Vishnu. Hiranyakashipu had a son, Prahlada, who disagreed and rebelled against his father. Prahlada became a devotee of Vishnu. This angered Hiranyakashipu, who tried to kill the boy, but with each attempt, Prahlada was protected by Vishnu's mystical power. When asked, Prahlada refused to acknowledge his father as the supreme lord of the universe and claimed that Vishnu is all-pervading and omnipresent. Hiranyakashipu pointed to a nearby pillar and asked if his Vishnu is in it, and said to his son Prahlada, "O most unfortunate Prahlada, you have always described a supreme being other than me, a supreme being who is above everything, who is the controller of everyone, and who is all-pervading. But where is he? If he's everywhere, then why is he not present before me in this pillar?" Prahlada then answered, "He was, he is, and he will be." And in an alternate version of the story, Prahlada answered, "He is in the pillars, and he is in the smallest twig." There you go, the all-pervasiveness, okay? Back to that. Hiranyakashipu, unable to control his anger, smashed the pillar with his mace, and following a tumultuous sound, Vishnu, in the form of Narasimha, appeared from it and moved to attack Hiranyakashipu in defense of Prahlada. In order to kill Hiranyakashipu and not upset the boon given by Brahma, the form of Narasimha was chosen. Hiranyakashipu could not be killed by human, deva, or animal. Narasimha was none of these, as he is a form of Vishnu incarnate as part human, part animal. He came upon Hiranyakashipu at twilight, when it is neither day or night, on the threshold of a courtyard, neither indoors or out, and put the demon on his thighs, neither earth nor space. Using his sharp fingernails, neither animate nor inanimate, as weapons, he disemboweled the demon king. Okay? There is always a loophole to get around these boons. If only the Asuras would realize that, right? The Shaiva scriptures narrate that the god Shiva assumed the avatar of Sharaba to pacify Narasimha afterwards when he started to threaten the world violently. Okay, because what we see in Narasimha is now that he's tasted blood, the blood of a demon, just as we saw with the matrikas in battle, he becomes bloodthirsty and violent. Okay, the Shiva Purana mentions, after slaying Hiranyakashipu, Narasimha's wrath threatened the world. At the behest of the gods, Shiva sent Virabhadra to tackle Narasimha. When that failed, Shiva manifested as Sharaba. Sharaba then attacked Narasimha and immobilized him. He thus quelled Narasimha's terrifying rage. Narasimha became a devotee of Shiva after being bound by Sharaba. Okay. And the Kurma Purana describes the preceding battle between the Purusha and demonic forces, in which he escapes a powerful weapon called Pasupata. According to Sofer, it describes how Prahlada's brothers, headed by Anuradha and thousands of other demons, were led to the Valley of Death by the lion produced from the body of man-lion. The same episode in the Matsya Purana, several chapters after its advent after its version of the Narasimha event. Okay, so the significance is listed here. Narasimha is a significant iconic symbol of creative resistance, hope against odds, victory over persecution, and destruction of evil. He's the destructor not only of external evil, but also one's inner evil of body, speech, and mind. Okay. And it says that Vishnu's incarnation as Narasimha is one of the most chosen themes amongst the avatars, perhaps next only to Rama and Krishna in popularity. Lord Narasimha also appears as one of Hanuman's 5 faces, who is a significant character in the Ramayana as Lord Rama's devotee. Okay, so we see this, okay, so you have this sort of terrifying image of Narasimha. And we can see how Narasimhi has the same qualities as one who is there to destroy and avert evil and who hates all forms of evil. We see that, that Shakti role. And as we'd indicated with the other matrikas that they all have a vice. As it was pointed out in Ferocious, the Theon Press book, she's not technically one of the 7 mothers, so she doesn't have technically a vice assigned to her. But if there was one, they said it would probably be rage. Okay, rage and anger. Because she represents that kind of uncontrollable rage. And in that aspect, it makes her similar to another goddess I want to talk about, Sekhmet. Okay, now Sekhmet is an Egyptian goddess. She's the daughter of the sun god Ra in Egypt, and she was extremely important. She's the vengeful manifestation of Ra's power, the Eye of Ra. She was said to breathe fire, and the hot winds of the desert were likened to her breath. I swear it's so hot out today that it's like a Sekhmet day. She was also believed to cause plagues, which were called her servants or messengers, though she was also called to ward off disease. In the myth about the end of Ra's rule on the earth, Ra sends the goddess Hathor in the form of Sekhmet to destroy mortals who conspired against him. In the myth, Sekhmet's bloodlust was not quelled at the end of battle. Okay, very similar to Narasimha. And we also see this in a version of Kali's myth, too. And led her to destroying almost all of humanity. To stop her, Ra poured out beer dyed with red ochre or hematite so that it resembled blood. Mistaking the beer for blood, she became so drunk that she gave up the slaughter and returned peacefully to Ra. Okay, we're going to have another podcast on Sekhmet, so you'll probably hear that story again. But, this idea of slowing her down with alcohol, beer saves the day, right? So she is... so we see this aspect. In this case, we don't have beer slowing down Narasimha, but we do have the god Shiva coming in his other form to his form as Sharaba. Now, here's another perhaps slightly more tantric inflection here. Okay, and this one's told in the Markandeya Purana and the Shiva Purana. And it says, at the beginning of the Treta Yuga, Lord Narasimha, an avatar of Vishnu, killed the unruly king Hiranyakashipu by tearing up his body and drinking his blood. Because of the anger in Hiranyakashipu's body and blood, Lord Narasimha, drunk on rage, could not be stopped. To calm him down, Lord Shiva came down as Sharaba, a bird-animal-human hybrid. Upon seeing this, Lord Narasimha created Gandhabarunda, a two-headed bird, to fight against Sarabeshwara. These two beings fought a long time, terrorizing the world without reaching a solution. I can talk. Seeing this, Shakti invoked Pratyangira, which is Narasimhi. Pratyangira appeared before these fighting beings and roared. She's a lion. When she roared, the terrified Sarabeshwara and Gandhabarun stopped their fight. Pratyangira had the combined power of Vishnu, Shiva, and Shakti, and she was more powerful than any of them. Wow. That is quite a goddess who is more powerful than the Adi Parashakti. Now here's another story where they say another version in ancient times when two rishis, Pratyangira and Angiras, were meditating, they rediscovered a goddess through a mula mantra who was nameless. Later she privileged the rishis by naming herself after them, and hence she was called Pratyangira Devi. Narasimhi is another name. It means Nara means human and Simha means lion. So she got named as thus as she appears with a lion's face and human body. The term prati means reverse, and angiras means attacking, as we just said. Okay, and she's also eulogized as Atravarna Bhadrakali, and that she is considered the ruling goddess of the Atharva Veda, the scripture that contains spells to conjure and cure. Pratyangira is one of the chief warrior goddesses of Lalita Tripura Sundari's army called Shakti Sena. Adi Parashakti, now remember, Adi Parashakti is the primal consciousness of the universe, okay? At an earlier time during the war between her and Bandasura, where Tripura Sundari is the one who fights, gave two boons to Pratyangira, that the protection offered by Pratyangira is invincible and no god, not even Adi Parashakti herself, can overcome it. Also, when invoked for offensive purposes, Pratyangira gives invincibility and sure victory to her devotee. Thus, Pratyangira is very popular among the Kshatriya's warrior caste. She is often described as the ultimate goddess to be worshipped for defensive and offensive power. Okay. So we have a goddess here who is said to be, she is a Shakti of her own, but she is said to be potentially more powerful than Shiva, Vishnu, and Adi Parashakti. So that is quite an energy to contend with. And so people who are interested, it's not that you can't approach her, although there's a lot of cautions about, particularly when one looks to encounter her through tantric practice and be initiated by a guru into her mantra. There are still a lot of warnings, even for devotees who practice perfectly, because sometimes sometimes people are not ready to see what they're going to see. And she is clearly an extremely powerful form of this primal consciousness, but she also is kind of an embodiment of rage. And it's interesting with rage as a force of the universe. We see this a lot throughout all of the matrikas. I'm kind of reflecting on this. And you know, and in rage we might connect with the fire. Like again, I'm sorry, my Greek mythology training comes back, and I keep thinking of the rage of Achilles in the Iliad, and how that rage. I think of the, you know, when he said when the river gets set on fire by Hephaestus, and you know, the river that tries to Skanda, that tries to drown Achilles when it's piling up with bodies, and so it's just setting all these bodies on fire, and it's just this river that's on fire. It's a crazy scene in the Iliad, but you know, the fire of rage and how much comes out of that. Now the fire doesn't, again, as we've said about fire doesn't have to represent rage. Fire can also represent, you know, fire is a creative energy, right? It's also a purifying energy. But this kind of also underscores the very elemental nature of the matrikas. They're very elemental, they're very earth connected, they're connected to what we think of as the traditional elements, you know, fire, air, water, earth. But they are, you know, they are sort of embodiments of that power as well, and of a greater power. So they're not to be underestimated, as they tend to represent the most extreme aspects of this particular energy. So that needs to be handled with care. Let me talk a little bit about the lion symbolism here, because the lion is, okay, the lion, just as we've seen the sow or the boar tending to be an earth symbol, and we've seen the bull as being a kind of moon symbol. So when we talk about the lion, we're talking about something that's more of a solar symbol. It has to do with the sun. And I had some notes on this. Let me just, I was looking at Campbell, and you know, and he talks about the figure of, let me find it in here. I had put it down, and then I closed my book on me again. I haven't done that in a while. Okay, I think this is what I'm looking for. Okay, yeah, Zervan Akarana, which is also sometimes known as Aeon, and is the one of the deities. So it's certainly an Orphic deity, and tends to be associated with Zoroastrian, which is another man lion, and also tends to be associated with Vishnu, and he tends to represent the and his name Zervan Akarana means boundless time. Okay, so again we had this connection to time and to death, and he has this head of the lion. So yeah, so the lion symbolism, we tend to see the lion kind of like the elephant, and I think the elephant tends to be used more for sovereignty and royalty in India, but the lion also has that kind of representation, and again it tends to represent the light of the sun. There's also a ferocity to the lion, just as there is to the boar. The lion is very, you know, like Durga comes in, her particular mount is also a lion, and it's a lion that actually also engages in destroying demons. Varahi and Narasimhi in the battle against the Asuras, the two of them, they both attack in their animal forms as animals. So Varahi attacks with the boar tusks, and Narasimhi with her, you know, with her claws and with her jaws as a lion. Okay, so there's some other explanations here, some other connections that are made. Let's see. This is another description. She's described as a goddess with a male lion's face and a female human body, representing the union of Shiva and Shakti, and holds the combined destructive power of Shiva and Shakti. Combination of lion and human represents the balance of good and evil. In Shaktism, Pratyangira is Siddhi Lakshmi, a form of Guya Kali. In Durga tradition, Pratyangira is Purna Chandi, the fiery destructive power of Brahman. Okay, so we have this fiery rage and destruction again. In the Vedas, Pratyangira is Atravana Bhadrakali, the goddess of Athartha Veda and magic spells. Okay. I had another note on her that I wanted to look at, again from Ferocious, which also mentions it. They talk a little bit about her iconography here too, which I'm looking at, but I think we've already discussed that. Let's see. I had a note here, and I just want to make sure I can find it. Okay. Okay, let me just read some of the historical context here from Ferocious. I'm looking at page 241. Narasimhi is a difficult deity to trace in terms of ritual texts or historical records. She occurs in the battle narratives of the Sri Devi Bhagavatam, where she attacks the demon army with her lion claws. Wow. The Narasimhi, resembling Narasimha, the man-lion incarnation, came there. This is what the text reads. The, in brackets, demons, came with great force to the battlefield, stretched their bows to their ears, and shot piercing arrows, sharpened on stone and tipped with iron, at the Chandika Devi. Narasimhi tore the strongest demons with the sharp nails, and devouring them, walked to and fro, made dreadful sounds. So this is the way it is in Chandi. There's a slightly different translation that I have, but it's the same one. It says, by contrast, the other matrikas use particular weapons like spears or swords. Since Narasimhi is the vital power of Narasimha, who likewise kills using his bare hands and claws, she too fights in the same visceral way. Being lion-headed, she acts in a very bestial fashion. Only the sow-headed Varahi shares a similar way of fighting in that she kills with her boar tusks. This is actually quite rare, and this bestial mode is not common. Even those demons who are animal-headed, like Rakshasas, tend to appear in text or iconography wielding weapons, much like their divine antagonists, and so the appearance of Narasimhi ripping and tearing at demons would be rather shocking to the medieval Brahminical audience. It's noteworthy also that Narasimhi, in the battle scene, enters the fight at the moment when the Devas are helpless to fight, and that she makes a point of attacking the strongest demons, strongest in quotes here. This would suggest that she is not only one of the fiercest of the Matrika goddesses, but is also one of the strongest among their number. While we find Narasimhi in the Brahminical pantheon, we note with interest that she is also present elsewhere. Her alternate name, Pratyangira, occurs in some medieval Jain tradition, where we find one text called the Pratyangira Kalpa, authored by the mystic Devabhadragam, and another work with the same title by Balachandrasan, which indicates that her cult was not limited to the Brahminical and its related traditions. As Jainism is a largely peaceful religion, it's somewhat surprising that such a ferocious goddess would be among the Jain deities. Likewise, Narasimhi is borrowed in the Tantric Buddhist tradition, where she appears as the lion-headed Simamukha, which means literally lion-faced, a protector goddess who embodies the ferocious and wild nature of the Dharma when confronted by evil. Okay, so the Dharma is this maintenance of the order of the universe. Interestingly, in the Tibetan tradition, Narasimhi is not a matrika, but a goddess who appears in the image of a matrika to better combat the matrikas themselves, a sharp departure from her Brahminical origins. Okay. Let's see. So they have, okay, so they mention that, you know, she is, in the medieval tantric tradition, she is included as one of the matrikas and called Narasimhi, appearing as a guardian figure with her sister goddesses. This can especially be found in Sri Vidya tradition, where she is essentially a dikpala, or guardian of direction, within a mandala. When she's mentioned independently, she is called Pratyangira. Whatever the name, however, these are simply two names for the same goddess. Within the Kubjika Tantra. Thank you, I got it. She appears as a minor figure, but is provided with a yantra, and that's another thing too. You don't see a lot of the matrikas having their own yantra, or symbol, sacred diagram, on some guidelines for ritual. So they talk about worship of Narasimhi, and victory over the enemies can be effected by means of the sounding of a war drum after worship of Ruja Kubjika, alias Pratyangira, at midnight on a cremation ground. While the drum is being sounded, the Pratyangira Gana should be recited. The goddess should receive a bali, in the nature of which is not clear, bali being a sacrifice. These passages, they say, are significant because they demonstrate Narasimhi is equated here with Ruja Kubjika, or howling Kubjika, a very prominent goddess of the medieval period to whom belongs a very extensive tantra. The first of the two quotes shows that Pratyangira is equated with supernatural powers as well as sovereignty and destruction of enemies. Narasimhi is also given a yantra, which is not a common feature of the other matrikas. And it also identifies her as a Ratra Devi. Okay. So let's see what other associations we have with her. Okay. So that's really all that I have from there on her. So you have this idea. So when we talk about her as a solar deity, if we think back to Sekhmet and what we just said about her breathing fire, it's almost like the demon Valor in Celtic myth, kind of representing the sun at its highest, its hottest, and its most destructive. From which one needs, certainly in India, looking forward to the monsoon season or the cooling rains, or here looking forward to autumn when things start to cool down, usually after Lunasa on August 1st. We start to see, the decline of the year begins as of mid-July in terms of the sun declining in the sky. But this would represent the sun at its height and certainly in a more ferocious form. I don't necessarily want to say evil form, or negative, but it's a form that can be, like I said, while the sun warms the earth and makes things grow, it's also the kind of sun that can cause a drought and burn things up, right? So there's that lion symbolism that links her to that kind of solar mythology and solar energy. Okay, so we talked about the Sekhmet story, and I guess the last thing I'm going to talk about is the idea of Narasimhi as a destroyer of black magic. And this seems to be her, like I said, her most prominent aspect, or the thing that she is most known for. So in order to do that, there needs to be sort of a reciting of her mantra, and certain sacrifices, usually hot peppers, I think, are said. It used to be animal sacrifices, but now they say, rather than the blood sacrifice, burning hot peppers, although not something I advise you do indoors. You definitely want to try to do something like that at some kind of an outside altar. But but she is, but she's also a goddess who does not, you can't just do one big ritual and that's it. She will, in order to build any kind of relationship with her, it takes some time. Now she is, so we have this, and what's interesting, by the way, is that they mention in Ferocious that the peppers are there to actually cool her rage, which is kind of weird. It's kind of like, I don't know, is it like drinking hot tea or hot coffee to make yourself cooler? I don't know, maybe something like that. In any case, she's a very, very powerful spirit. She is evoked when people do feel they are afflicted by somebody's negative magic. And I should indicate that sometimes that's intentional and sometimes it's not intentional. Sometimes people do kind of put a quote-unquote bad mojo on people without intending to do so, or send negative energy that way. So she would be a good goddess for protection against this. But again, it's a good idea to take care, because if you do something wrong or you don't keep up your end of the bargain, you could find yourself in the bad position that your attacker might have been in. So so that's something to be borne in mind. She's her worship comes with a lot of warnings, even more, I think, than Chinnamasta, even more than Varahi. So, so again, not saying that people who don't feel a need shouldn't, maybe investigate, but be careful. You might want to just start with reciting mantras or something and see how it goes from there. But getting fully involved in that, that can be, it's one of those things that could be, depending on how you respond to these relationships with these deities, this could be a, there could be a lot that backfires there, I guess, let's put it that way. So I would urge anybody with an interest in Narasimhi to be cautious. That said, she's obviously a very respected goddess and one, and a very potent deity of protection and anti-negative magic and so forth. So, okay, with that, I'm going to end. I'm going to try not to go on endlessly like I have in the last couple of these. At least I feel like I have. Okay, so this is the last of the Matrika series. I'm going to cover the Morrigan for Halloween, I think, as I mentioned last time. And then I'm going to cover some of the darker Egyptian goddesses to probably flesh out the year. I might change it up a little bit if I come across something else that looks maybe more seasonally appropriate or interesting. And then next year we're going to get into some of the other ones. Certainly I've had requests to talk about Babylon in the Thelemic tradition, and I've also had requests to talk about some of the African deities or some of the South American, sort of voodoo or Santeria kind of deities. So those will probably also be up for next year. And probably there will be another Hindu series on the Nav Durgas, which I did not get to this year, but I just thought, okay, people probably want to break from Hinduism at this point. I mean, unless it happens to be your thing. I think a lot of people, judging from what I'm seeing in my numbers, a lot of people are interested in Hecate, a lot of people are interested in Medusa, and a lot of people are interested in Lilith. Those seem to be some of the most popular podcasts. So, so I think I need to kind of shift my focus. This has been a very interesting and intense year, looking at these particular visions of the divine feminine, which I encourage anybody, even if they don't practice Hinduism, even if they just have a general interest in the dark feminine. The Mahavidyas and the Matrikas and a lot of these visions, they show the complicated nature of the feminine. And in that complication, it's kind of like we see embodied everything, the auspicious and the inauspicious, and both are divine. That's really the message that you want to take away here. Yes, there's the vice, but, and it's a matter of how do you balance those things. All of these things are on a spectrum. They just are. We apply an ethical, I like this, I like that. And of course, when you are living in the world and interacting with others, you practice discrimination. And I don't mean that in the negative sense. I mean discrimination in terms of making decisions about what's right or wrong for a particular situation. So, so the Matrikas, they're definitely reminders of that ferocious energy. And they're reminders in our culture, I think about this a lot, about how that there's the potent feminine energy that underlies everything. You have these Shaktis that are kind of so fierce they end up in the underworld, or staying in the underworld, because they are the kind of thing that cannot be near the surface or cannot be out in the open, because they could be too destructive that way. But these are the powers of consciousness, and basically it's pointing to the intense power of consciousness. And when I think about instances where you see men subjugating women, now I'm not going to say this is true about all men or that all men think this way or whatever, but I sometimes see something like that. Like a friend of mine posted this article about Christian wives and obedience, and get a young wife and train her early, and it's like, oh, fuck you. Whoever wrote that article, I get really tempted to send one of the Matrikas after one of those people, let me tell you. But they have, there's this, this idea that the woman has to submit and be obedient because that's her role, is to be passive and to be patient and to be submissive and to be chaste and all this kind of crap. It's not, the supreme primal power of the feminine is something that, any man, no matter how big his gun is, and I mean either literally or an actual gun that you shoot, and also the one that they carry around with them that they seem to prize very much, or have a big attachment to how big it is or whatever. That I don't really think women are honestly that attached to. I'm not going to go off on that tangent. But in any case, you have this, this idea of the man who's going to be manly over the weak woman. The woman being womanly is weak. Being womanly is not weak, and that's the message here. That message, by the way, tends to be a message that comes through in the novels that I've written. Maeve came out in June, and I don't know, by the time I put this out, it's quite possible that the Morrigan timelines will be out. Both of them kind of take a look at these themes and turn some of the normal ways of looking at this on their head. So probably worth checking out if this is a theme that interests you. And with that, I'm going to say, we're going to call it another podcast. Thank everybody for listening. Check me out on social media, Chthonia on YouTube. Please subscribe and press the bell notification so you know when another podcast comes out. Chthonia Podcast, 2 words on Facebook, 1 word on Twitter and Instagram. Patreon.com/Chthonia. I've got a couple special podcasts just for patrons coming up on specialized subjects like the Hindu underworld and looking at the comparisons between sort of quantum mechanics and the Hindu scriptures. It's not going to be a whole class. It's not going to be super intensive. But just to give us an idea of how those two actually do seem to fit together to some degree. And there'll be some other ones, too, that are coming up by request. So join Patreon. There's benefits. There's going to be more benefits coming. And so, it's patreon.com/Chthonia. And beyond that, I have my Chthonia.net, where you can get all these podcasts back. You can listen to them all on metapsychosis.com, on your computer. And, of course, if you haven't subscribed, you can do that as well. And also you can see links to my other work and then to my related services, which have to do with working with people in transition through Reiki and using tarot and some other methods to help guide people through transitions, not to fix things for them, but to help guide people through transitions, give them some kind of help or advice. And that's all scheduled and explained at liminalreiki.com. So with that, I'm going to say thank you again, and till next time.